two conversations. There's the conversation that we're having, and there's the conversation that we're thinking. And sometimes the conversation that we're thinking about or we're having over here, some of that stuff needs to be in the conversation that we're having.
Welcome to the podcast about communication in business. I'm your host, George Torok. Did you know that I'm known as the speech coach for executives? That's because I help business leaders deliver the intended message for greater success. And we do that through one-on-one coaching or training for the team. On this podcast, you will hear insights and perspectives from communication experts from around the world. My guest today is Keith Willis. Here's 3 facts that I think you should know about Keith. 1, he is president and founder of Core Management Training with nearly 30 years in healthcare, spanning sales, leadership, operations, and training for major pharmaceutical companies on multi-billion-dollar brands. Core Management Training helps organizations build leadership competencies, coaching systems, and sales performance frameworks that strengthen managers and elevate teams. 2, Keith is a former U.S. Army captain. Yeah, you don't mess with him. He honed his skills in team building, strategic planning, and leadership before translating those lessons into coaching and developing leaders across the pharmaceutical industry. And 3, Keith sat on the Berlin Wall just weeks before it came down, an experience that shaped his appreciation for change, resilience, and perspective. Keith Willis, welcome to your intended message.
Thank you so much, George. Really excited to be on the podcast with you. Funny when you said, don't mess with Captain Willis. My wife jokes sometimes and she says, don't mess with Captain Willis. That's when she's thinking something serious that I mean business. She'll call me Captain Willis.
And now, Keith, I'm curious, that experience of sitting on the Berlin Wall was created one perspective in your mind, and then when the wall, and there's no way you could have known that when you sat on that wall that would fall just weeks later. There's no, I mean, who predicted that? And I'm curious, what did that do to how you see things, how you see the world?
Thanks for the question, George. I, when I think about that time, and I believe this would be what the mid late 80s, and it was the 40th anniversary of the wall going up. And at the time, I was stationed in Germany, and they had checkpoint Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie. And I drove through those checkpoints, and driving through the eastern section of Germany, it was so different. And I remember getting to the last checkpoint where you get to Berlin, and it's the lights come on. Literally, everything is gray and dark. All of a sudden you're in the US sector, everything changes. And then with the wall coming down and having an opportunity to talk to people over the years about some of the changes in that part of the world, it just lets you know that as much as we think that things can't change, that they do change. And that it's something that we live with constantly. If we all think about our careers, things that we've done over time, we always think in terms of this is never going to end. I have this situation, I have this problem, and then we look years later and we figure out, wow, that was good experience. There's something I learned from that, or I definitely have moved forward from where I was in the past. So it gives that perspective that even situations that seem that they're never going to change and nothing's going to happen, that change can happen at any time.
And there are so many times when we think that the way our life is right now is the way it will always be, or the way it is in our workplace. That's the way we've always done it this way, so we will always do it this way. But if a Berlin Wall can fall, if a pandemic can come and go, we can change.
Absolutely right, George. You're so spot on with that. And it's interesting, if you talk to people, it's almost like the pandemic didn't happen, and it was just a short time ago.
Yeah, and one of the side benefits to the pandemic is now we are more willing to communicate online through video conferencing, something that the pandemic kind of encouraged us to do, and it turns out it's convenient.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you speak the truth about that, George. It's interesting because when we talk about focusing on your intended message, you have to be a lot better at being able to articulate that message, whether you're in person or whether you're communicating virtually. And that's a challenge for a lot of teams, and even teams that have traditionally been remote because you see your customers, but you might not see your sales manager. You may communicate by different avenues, by phone, by webinars, by Zoom now. Back in the day, there were other technologies that we used on a regular basis, but customers are asking for more virtual engagements. And how do you do that more effectively and making sure that you are able to provide your intended message?
And Keith, you are a champion of leaders being coaches, of coaching their team. And again, I see, in my mind at least, a conflict there because you came from the military, and I don't think of a military captain as coaching the team. I just think of them barking orders. So, how did you transfer the military discipline and always follow the order, sir, into coaching? What did you have to go through to cross that change yourself?
George, I would say that they're more similar than different. There's a thought process that if you're in the military that you only follow orders. And one of the things that the military does well, it prepares everybody for leadership. So even as a young lieutenant, I had platoon sergeants, and while they reported to me, I was smart enough to know that they knew a lot more than me, and that it was better for me to know and listen to what they had to say. The other part of that is that when you look at the chain of command, the platoon sergeants rely upon their squad leaders. And so their squad leaders run their teams, run their sections. And so leadership is always pushed down. It's the next man up. And from that, when you so one of the lessons I had to learn that yes, I was an officer, but at the same time, at times you have to be a follower. To be a good leader, you have to be a good follower. And sometimes you have people on your team that are trying to tell you things that you need to listen to. And if you don't listen to those things, you're not going to be able to accomplish the mission. So there's as much coaching that occurs in the military as there does in corporate America. In fact, I would argue uh, for every school that I went to, all of those schools in the military prepared me for the next level of where I would be in the military. And so, unlike corporate America, we promote managers. We don't necessarily take them through some level of leadership training. I had 6 months of additional training after I got my commission before I went to a line unit and became a platoon leader. And so, if you think about it, what corporation is going to let somebody go to school for 6 months before they and prepare them for the job and then put them in the job and then help them excel?
And you're right about that. We promote managers, and we promote them because they show up every day. They're reasonably competent. They seem to know they have expertise, but they aren't necessarily ready yet for leadership. And we don't provide that. We expect them to just learn on the job as they go along, and that's not fair to them or for the team. So when you work with organizations, where do you start in developing the leadership qualities in those new leaders?
So, George, I think the first thing you have to do is you have to do some level of assessment. The pharma industry across the board has done some level of training, and oftentimes it might be later than earlier. What happens is you have a lot of managers that have a variety of different skill sets across the spectrum. You have some managers that are newer. You have some managers that have been around for a long time. And it's not that much different than a lot of other industries where you have a variety of different people. It's just that the way that the training can be set up can be kind of a smattering here, a smattering there. There may not necessarily be a curriculum. So you start with assessing where people are. That might include stakeholder interviews, that might include assessments, 360s, the traditional tools that most industries use to do some level of a needs assessment. Once you do that, then you figure out where are the gaps, what are the needs, what are the most critical things and priorities that the team needs that are going to help them be most effective and drive sales performance ultimately, because ultimately the reason sales managers are there, not to push reports, it's to coach people and to improve sales and help the company reach their goals and objectives.
You have a lot of experience coaching people in the pharma industry. What is it about the pharma industry that makes their challenging for them when it comes to pharma sales?
Pharma sales is unique in that when you think about most industries, when a salesperson goes in, they get the order. You sign something. A pharma, a representative is going in to see a physician, and they're trying to convince that physician to write a prescription for a medication. That physician is going to turn around, write that medication for a patient, and convince that patient you need to go in, you need to go to the pharmacy, and you need to get that drug. So it's not a direct sale, it's more of an influence over time. And generally, you have a territory, a representative is going to see the same people, and that may not be that much different than if you have, for example, a list of clients and customers that you talk to on a regular basis from a business development standpoint. Some of those people you've worked with, some of them you don't. But here it's this long play. A representative may be in a territory for any, 2, 3, 4 years, depending on the company, downsizing and those type of things. But you develop a relationship with the staff, the office, and so there's this constant, you're always in and out. If you have samples, you may go in, drop samples. In those cases, you may only have a couple of minutes to speak with a doctor. You may have some lunches, you may see the physician at a conference or something like that where you may have a little bit more time. But ultimately, from a physician perspective, they're thinking, what else are you going to tell me about this drug I haven't heard? I see a lot of patients, and you think about the baby boomers and a number of those. I think it's 10,000 are going to be available for their Social Security benefits between now and I think 2030, 10,000 a day. So if you think about that number, and as we get older, our bodies fall apart. So conceivably, it probably means more people are going to the doctors. Worldwide, there's a shortage of physicians. There's a shortage of healthcare professionals. And now you have a representative that's going in to see a doctor that has very, very limited time. So you think about it from that perspective, that's one of the challenges, is that not a lot of time, and at times the physician's not sure of the need. And then when you think about technology, whether it be AI, omni-channel, digital marketing, all the tools and resources that are available, those are all the things that you begin to say, what's the value of the representative? Why should I see that rep? Why should I spend time with that representative? So those are just some of the nuances from a pharmaceutical industry relatively to other industries. And then I think a lot of other industries do more things. We talked a little bit about kind of this virtual sell, but at least in the United States, predominantly most of these calls are in person. There aren't a lot of webinars. There aren't a lot of those type of things. And that being said, that also means that we don't necessarily use those type of CRM tools that other industries have capability to record calls that happen. A little harder when you're in person. You're going to record what was said, what happened, and then be able to go back and look and say, oh, from a coaching perspective, we should focus on this, or be able to use some of that technology to be able to enhance coaching and feedback for sales representatives and provide tools for managers to be more effective from that perspective.
So, when you can't review the recordings as a coach, how do you help the sales rep? How do you influence them?
So managers go out into the field with sales representatives. Generally, they'll spend anywhere from 8 to 10 days a year. Usually it's a 4 to 6 week cycle. And then the manager writes what we call a field coaching report. And that field coaching report just talks about the day, what happened, action plans, those type of things. And I'm sure a lot of other industries do something similar. It's just that they have the use of technology. And through the CRM, they can look at call notes and get a sense of, what the call notes were and continuity of the call and all of the things that go along with that. So the manager does have tools. They have a lot of reports. They can get a sense of how many calls a representative made a day, what the primary product was. So there are definitely things that are available for managers to be able to use to effectively coach their representatives.
When you're working with the managers on how to improve how they coach, what mistakes do you find they commonly make?
It's a good question, George. I think one of the things that, and I laugh and I don't know that it's really funny, but you think about a lot of the coaching models, grow coaching model, for example, those models are based on a lot of questions. And oftentimes, what the manager's trying to do is they're trying to lead the representative to an answer that they want to hear. The manager often has a thought process. They've made an observation. They have a lot of experience. A lot of managers were top sales folks, and they have a sense when things are going well or they're not going well. They don't provide their point of view, and they don't support that point of view with data and observations that they've seen, and then they don't ask the representative, what do you think about what I said? So you can have a conversation. What it sounds like 1,000 questions. And I remember earlier in my days as a sales manager, representative saying, what is it that you want me to say? Because they know you're looking for an answer. And I see that time and time again when managers are coaching. They ask 1,000 questions, they never get to the point, and they're frustrated because they're thinking the representative's not listening, they're being difficult, they're not paying attention, when in fact the representative's sitting there and they're thinking, I don't even have an idea of what we're supposed to be even talking about. So it's that yin and yang that I find that coaching becomes very difficult because it feels like that the manager has an agenda. And they often do have an agenda. And I think it's okay to have an agenda, but I think if you both agree that this is the topic and the thing that we need to be talking about and how do we solve and help improve that area, it's going to be far more effective than if the manager says, I want you to do this, I want you to do that, I want you to do the other, and then follow up weeks later and find that nothing's happened. Well, of course not, because you never agreed that that was what needed to be done. And so the representative is they're being a good employee because they're listening to their manager, and gets back to this whole piece around taking orders and following direction. Corporate does that a lot also, and that's what they're doing. So nothing moves forward, and managers begin to be very frustrated by that. And and it's not just the grow coaching model. It's a lot of coaching models. It's even if you go through a coaching program where you're coaching other people outside of salespeople, it's asking questions, letting people come up with their own, observations and challenges and those type of things. And I think there's value in that, but I also think that the reason you're being hired oftentimes is because of your expertise, your experience, and you have a way to be able to share that, but also have a way to do it in a way that you're working alongside that person.
Keith, so I'm thinking there that the manager, the coach, has the experience, the knowledge, and for some reason they're trying to tiptoe around because they want to suddenly bring the sales rep up to speed in just one conversation, but the sales rep doesn't have the experience of that manager's experience, training, and then the manager is frustrated because the person isn't getting it, and the sales rep is frustrated because he doesn't understand what the hell the manager's talking about.
You got it.
And it's been, and some people seem to think that coaching should only be about asking questions. But I suppose if you ever watch a football game, you don't see the coach on the side of the field saying, "Okay, now George, when they attack you, what do you think you should be doing? And instead, he just tells them what to do. Go left, go left. There's a hole on the left side. Go there. And so sometimes it means that, hey, you just need to say what you need to say, and then at least they got something they can think about and they can grasp. And oh, that's what you mean. And when you are coaching people, there must be times when you see the lights suddenly go on. They go, oh, really? That's what I should be doing? And that's an aha moment. So what are some of the other aha moments that you've noticed in your training when you're coaching, when you're helping these coaches be better coaches?
That's one of them. Um, how does that saying go? There's two sides to every problem. The lights go on, and the manager realizes that I'm part of the problem. I'm part of the challenge of being able to get through my representative. It's not always them. Some of it's me. And then the other thing is that Rome wasn't built overnight. These conversations take time, and you have to be willing to invest the time. And there's this pressure of managers have 1,000 things to do. They may have anywhere from 8 to 12 representatives, and all of the numbers and all of the things that they're managing. They've got stuff they've got to report back to their boss on. All of those things, and at times it gets in the way of understanding that if you're trying to build a skill set, that doesn't happen overnight. And in some cases, it's not even always a skill set. I remember working with one of my sales representatives as a manager, and they would not close. And I remember saying to them, I said, you've been doing this for a long time. I know you know how to close. Why don't you close? And what he told me was that he didn't close because he didn't like to be closed. That when he went to see somebody, that he'd like to know as much or if not more about what it was that was being sold than they did. And that was one of the reasons why he didn't like to be sold. And so at the time he was dating this young woman, and he was thinking about getting married, and we had a whole discussion about rings. And I said, I'm sure you know a lot about rings. And at the time I articulated that I bought my wife an anniversary band. I said, I went to about 5 different places. I said, the last person I bought from, the reason I bought from her was because she said to me, will you be buying that ring today? And I stopped and I paused, and I told him, I said, I could not think of a reason why not to buy that ring. And I said, I had done a lot of research. I said, I was scared, and I needed somebody to sit on the side of the table with me to help me make that decision. And so the consequence of here was somebody that had it was a value set, and part of the coaching and conversation was around values and belief and using stories to get them to understand and see a different version of why it was important to close. Not that they didn't know how to do that. And so that's a lot more than just asking 1,000 questions. But in this case, I did ask a question, but I asked a question around something that was important because I knew that he knew how to close. So it's those nuances and things that if you can help managers, help coaches, and help leaders be more effective at, that you can help them be a lot more effective, that it can have significant impact. So the consequence for this sales representative, they started closing more effectively.
Will you be buying that ring today? And when and that question is so clear, and it's suddenly, oh, I have to decide. Why would I not? I want to do this, right? I want to come. I want to be a hero when I come home.
Right.
So, in simple advice, and are there now? That's a good phrase. Are there other magic phrases that you've found helpful to the coaching process?
I don't know if they're magic phrases. Um, I think it's being in the moment. I'm trying to remember One of my salespeople told me this is ages ago. He used to always say, "You always have a way to come up with the right question." I said, "Well, you play off of what people say to you, and so you use that as an element in the question process because it's kind of their mindset. They present things that they're thinking about, and you use that and you switch that." I think the same thing goes with coaching. Paying attention to body language, paying attention to what people don't say, all of those things are important. And the challenge can be you can spend so much time thinking about what's the next question I'm going to ask. You have to be present. So I think that's the bigger thing. So it's I mean, yeah, you can write down a bunch of different phrases and things that you can come up with, but I think ultimately if you're present, you come up with good questions to be able to ask. I don't know, George, what's been your experience?
And I'm with you there on being totally in the moment because when you listen and try to put yourself into the mindset of the other person, and I just wrote down what I thought was significant. Listen for what people don't say, and that needs to be drawn out. It needs to be drawn. Look for what they're not saying because that tells you more than what they're saying, maybe.
Yeah.
And when you're hearing what people don't say, Keith, what do you do or say to draw that out? Do you simply blurt it out, or do you coach them to say that?
Sometimes you coach them. People give clues. There may be some hesitancy. You may say something like, "I see you're a little hesitant," or by the sound of your voice, it doesn't sound like you're totally bought in. Tell me a little bit more about what you're thinking. Using phrases and questions like that can coax people, open people up. Oftentimes in these conversations, we're having another conversation. There's two conversations. There's a conversation that we're having, and there's the conversation that we're thinking. And sometimes the conversation that we're thinking about or we're having over here, some of that stuff needs to be in the conversation that we're having because those thoughts, feelings, and emotions, sometimes if you introduce those into the conversation, they can make a world of difference. And if you can help people pull that out, and you got to do the same thing as a coach, sometimes when you articulate what you're feeling, what you're thinking, can make a big difference because then it gives people an idea of what are the stakes, why is this important, and they'll be more open if you're more open.
Mm. And that's a valuable point there. There's the conversation we're having, and then there's the conversation in your head, and there's probably a reason for that conversation in your head, and you need to find a way to bring them together because there's a reason why that's going on in your head. It's your perceptions. You're noticing something that's not quite right here, or something we're missing, and bring that up. Keith, for people who would like to know more about you and your programs, they can find that at your website, and in particular, the programs that you offer. Tell us who's that for and who will get the most from that.
Primarily, I focus on pharmaceutical industry. Core management training is around leadership training, leadership competencies, coaching, those type of things. But coaching goes across industries. It doesn't make a difference. If you have a problem or you want to upskill your management team, you want them to be more effective, you can reach out to me and we can have a conversation and I can see if I'm a fit for something that you need.
And you can find the website, coremanagementtraining.com. You can find that link in the description below. Keith, I also understand you have another program coming out soon called Never Look for a Job Again. Is that because you win the lottery?
I used to have a manager that said it should be your job to lose. And, it got me to thinking. I've gotten a lot of calls recently about downsizings and things like that. And you have to always be ready, no matter how secure or how effective you are in your role, that there might be a time where you get that call that says, hey, your job's being eliminated. So never look for a job again is, help people take control of their careers. We talk about your intended message. Well, being ready is one of them, and making sure that you have all the things and that you're networking, you're doing all the things that you need to do to make sure that you're career ready. So that's what the course is about. I just find that I have a lot of these conversations even as I'm supporting companies and clients, and this is something that's important.
And you can find that, more information about that, on his website, coremanagementtraining.com. Keith, as we prepare to wrap up, imagine you're sitting with a company leader who wants to start coaching their team. It's not something they've done systematically before, but they want to start coaching their team to be more effective, to work together. If there's 1, 2, or 3 pieces of advice you would give this leader in approaching how he or she's going to coach, what might that advice be?
I would start with number one, start simple. When we talk about coaching, we usually say coaching and feedback. I would start with feedback. Feedback's simpler, and I would start with positive feedback, letting people know what they do well. I would start there, and then and I would let people know, hey, we're going to start giving you some feedback. Primarily be positive. Do that for several weeks. It should still be a 7-to-1 ratio when you begin to give more critical feedback. There are several models that are out there. I would learn a model, and then I would bridge into coaching. And that coaching can happen, just as effectively with just managers doing their one-on-ones. If they're doing one-on-ones with their salespeople, and say, hey, as part of this, we're going to do some sales coaching. And I think if you do those 3 things, start with feedback. 2, communicate that you're going to do that and use models that are out there and available. And number 3, use your sales one-on-ones to do that. I think those will be some things that will help managers do that more effectively.
Valuable advice. My guest today is Keith Willis, reminding you to be a good leader, be a good follower. If you like what you heard, tell your friends and post your 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, because that helps more listeners find us. Come back every week for more practical insights to help you deliver your intended message. I'm your host, George Torok.